Ancient Rome was an Italic civilization that began on the Italian Peninsula as early as the 8th century BC, located along the Mediterranean Sea and centered on the city of Rome. It expanded to become one of the largest empires in the ancient world, with an estimated 50 to 90 million inhabitants and covering 6.5 million square kilometers at its height between the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. In its approximately 12 centuries of existence, Roman civilization shifted from a monarchy to a classical republic and then to an increasingly autocratic empire. Through conquest and assimilation, it came to dominate southern and western Europe, Asia Minor, North Africa, and parts of northern and eastern Europe. Rome was preponderant throughout the Mediterranean region and was one of the most powerful entities of the ancient world. It is often grouped into classical antiquity together with ancient Greece, and the similar cultures and societies are known as the Greco-Roman world. Ancient Roman society has contributed to modern government, law, politics, engineering, art, literature, architecture, technology, warfare, religion, language, and society. A highly developed civilization, Rome professionalized and expanded its military and created a system of government called res publica, the inspiration for modern republics such as the United States and France. It achieved impressive technological and architectural feats, such as the construction of an extensive system of aqueducts and roads, as well as the construction of large monuments, palaces, and public facilities. By the end of the Republic, Rome had conquered the lands around the Mediterranean and beyond. Its domain extended from the Atlantic to Arabia and from the mouth of the Rhine to North Africa. The Roman Empire emerged with the end of the Republic and the dictatorship of Augustus Caesar. 721 years of Roman-Persian wars started in 92 BC with the First War against Parthia. It would become the longest conflict in human history, and have major lasting effects and consequences for both empires. Under Trajan, the empire reached its territorial peak. Republican mores and traditions started to decline during the imperial period, with civil wars becoming a prelude common to the rise of a new emperor. Splinter states, such as the Palmyrene Empire, would temporarily divide the empire during the crisis of the 3rd century, plagued by internal instability and attacked by various migrating peoples. The western part of the empire broke up into independent kingdoms in the 5th century. This splintering is a landmark historians use to divide the ancient period of universal history from the pre-medieval Dark Ages of Europe. Founding myth. According to the founding myth of Rome, the city was founded on the 21st of April 753 BC by twin brothers Romulus and Remus, who descended from the Trojan prince Aeneas and who were grandsons of the Latin king Numitor of Alba Longa. King Numitor was deposed from his throne by his brother Amulius, while Numitor's daughter, Rhea Silvia, gave birth to the twins. Because Rhea Silvia was raped and impregnated by Mars, the Roman god of war, the twins were considered half-divine. The new king, Amulius, feared Romulus and Remus would take back the throne, so he ordered them to be drowned. A she-wolf saved and raised them, and when they were old enough, they returned the throne of Alba Longa to Numitor. The twins then founded their own city, but Romulus killed Remus in a quarrel over the location of the Roman kingdom. Though some sources state the quarrel was about who was going to rule or give his name to the city. Romulus became the source of the city's name. In order to attract people to the city, Rome became a sanctuary for the indigent, exiled, and unwanted. This caused a problem for Rome, which had a large workforce but was bereft of women. Romulus traveled to the neighboring towns and tribes and attempted to secure marriage rights. But as Rome was so full of undesirables, they all refused. Legend says that the Latins invited the Sabines to a festival and stole their unmarried maidens, leading to the integration of the Latins and the Sabines. Another legend, recorded by Greek historian Dionysius of Halicarnassus, says that Prince Aeneas led a group of Trojans on a sea voyage to found a new Troy, since the original was destroyed in the outcome of the Trojan War. After a long time in rough seas, they landed at the banks of the Tiber River. Not long after they landed, the men wanted to take to the sea again, but the women who were traveling with them did not want to leave. One woman, named Roma, suggested that the women burn the ships out at sea to prevent them from leaving. At first, the men were angry with Roma, but they soon realized that they were in the ideal place to settle. They named the settlement after the woman who torched the ships. The Roman poet Virgil recounted this legend in his classical epic poem the Aeneid. In the Aeneid, the Trojan prince Aeneas is destined by the gods in his enterprise of founding a new Troy. In the epic, the women also refused to go back to the sea, but they were not left on the Tiber. After reaching Italy, Aeneas, who wanted to marry Lavinia, was forced to wage war with her former suitor, Turnus. According to the poem, the Alban kings were descended from Aeneas, and thus Romulus, the founder of Rome, was his descendant. Kingdom. The city of Rome grew from settlements around a ford on the river Tiber, a crossroads of traffic and trade. According to archaeological evidence, the village of Rome was probably founded sometime in the 8th century BC, though it may go back as far as the 10th century BC, by members of the Latin tribe of Italy on the top of the Palatine Hill. The Etruscans, who had previously settled to the north in Etruria, seem to have established political control in the region by the late 7th century BC, forming an aristocratic and monarchical elite. The Etruscans apparently lost power by the late 6th century BC, and at this point, the original Latin and Sabine tribes reinvented the government by creating a republic, with much greater restraints on the ability of rulers to exercise power. Roman tradition and archaeological evidence point to a complex within the Forum Romanum as the seat of power for the king and the beginnings of the religious center there as well. Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome, succeeding Romulus, began Rome's building projects with his royal palace, the Regia, and the complex of the Vestal Virgins. Republic. According to tradition and later writers such as Livy, the Roman Republic was established around 509 BC, when the last of the 7 kings of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, was deposed by Lucius Junius Brutus, and a system based on annually elected magistrates and various representative assemblies was established. Her constitution set a series of checks and balances, and a separation of powers. The most important magistrates were the 2 consuls, who together exercised executive authority such as imperium, or military command. The consuls had to work with the Senate, which was initially an advisory council of the ranking nobility, or patricians, but grew in size and power. Other magistrates of the Republic include tribunes, quaestors, aediles, praetors, and censors. The magistracies were originally restricted to patricians, but were later open to common people, or plebeians. Republican voting assemblies included the Comitia Centuriata, which voted on matters of war and peace and elected men to the most important offices, and the Comitia Tributa, which elected less important officers. In the 4th century BC, Rome had come under attack by the Gauls, who now extended the power in the Italian Peninsula beyond the Po Valley and through Etruria. On the 16th of July 390 BC, a Gallic army under the leadership of a tribal chieftain named Brennus met the Romans on the banks of the Allia River, just 10 miles north of Rome. Brennus defeated the Romans, and the Gauls marched directly to Rome. Most Romans had fled the city, but some barricaded themselves upon the Capitoline Hill for a last stand. The Gauls looted and burned the city, then laid siege to the Capitoline Hill. The siege lasted 7 months. The Gauls then agreed to give the Romans peace in exchange for £1,000 of gold. The Romans gradually subdued the other peoples on the Italian Peninsula, including the Etruscans. The last threat to Roman hegemony in Italy came when Tarentum, a major Greek colony, enlisted the aid of Pyrrhus of Epirus in 281 BC. But this effort failed as well. The Romans secured the conquests by founding Roman colonies in strategic areas, thereby establishing stable control over the region of Italy they had conquered. Punic Wars. In the 3rd century BC, Rome faced a new and formidable opponent, Carthage. Carthage was a rich, flourishing Phoenician city-state that intended to dominate the Mediterranean area. The two cities were allies in the times of Pyrrhus, who was a menace to both. But with Rome's hegemony in mainland Italy and the Carthaginian thalassocracy, these cities became the two major powers in the western Mediterranean, and their contention over the Mediterranean led to conflict. The First Punic War began in 264 BC, when the city of Messana asked for Carthage's help in their conflicts with Hiera II of Syracuse. After the Carthaginian intercession, Messana asked Rome to expel the Carthaginians. Rome entered this war because Syracuse and Messana were too close to the newly conquered Greek cities of southern Italy, and Carthage was now able to make an offensive through Roman territory. Along with this, Rome could extend its domain over Sicily. Although the Romans had experience in land battles, to defeat this new enemy, naval battles were necessary. Carthage was a maritime power, and the Roman lack of ships and naval experience would make the path to the victory a long and difficult one for the Roman Republic. Despite this, after more than 20 years of war, Rome defeated Carthage and a peace treaty was signed. Among the reasons for the Second Punic War was the subsequent war reparations Carthage acquiesced to at the end of the First Punic War. The Second Punic War is famous for its brilliant generals. On the Punic side, Hannibal and Hasdrubal; on the Roman, Marcus Claudius Marcellus, Quintus Fabius Maximus and Publius Cornelius Scipio. Rome fought this war simultaneously with the First Macedonian War. The war began with the audacious invasion of Hispania by Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who had led operations on Sicily in the First Punic War. Hannibal, son of Hamilcar Barca, rapidly marched through Hispania to the Italian Alps, causing panic among Rome's Italian allies. The best way found to defeat Hannibal's purpose of causing the Italians to abandon Rome was to delay the Carthaginians with a guerrilla war of attrition, a strategy propounded by Quintus Fabius Maximus, who would be nicknamed Cunctator, and whose strategy would be forever after known as Fabian. Due to this, Hannibal's goal was unachieved. He could not bring enough Italian cities to revolt against Rome and replenish his diminishing army, and he thus lacked the machines and manpower to besiege Rome. Still, Hannibal's invasion lasted over 16 years, ravaging Italy. Finally, when the Romans perceived that Hannibal's supplies were running out, they sent Scipio, who had defeated Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal in Spain, to invade the unprotected Carthaginian hinterland and force Hannibal to return to defend Carthage itself. The result was the ending of the Second Punic War by the famously decisive Battle of Zama in October 202 BC, which gave to Scipio his ignomen Africanus. At great cost, Rome had made significant gains. The conquest of Hispania by Scipio, and of Syracuse, the last Greek realm in Sicily, by Marcellus. More than half-century after these events, Carthage was humiliated and Rome was no more concerned about the African menace. The Republic's focus now was only to the Hellenistic kingdoms of Greece and revolts in Hispania. However, Carthage, after having paid the war indemnity, felt that its commitments and submission to Rome had ceased, a vision not shared by the Roman Senate. When in 151 BC Numidia invaded Carthage, Carthage asked for Roman intercession. Ambassadors were sent to Carthage. Among them was Marcus Porcius Cato, who, after seeing that Carthage could make a comeback and regain its importance, ended all his speeches, no matter what the subject was, by saying, "Ceterum censeo Carthaginem esse delendum." As Carthage fought with Numidia without Roman consent, the Third Punic War began when Rome declared war against Carthage in 149 BC. Carthage resisted well at the first strike, with the participation of all the inhabitants of the city. However, Carthage could not withstand the attack of Scipio Aemilianus, who entirely destroyed the city and its walls, enslaved and sold all the citizens, and gained control of that region, which became the province of Africa. Thus ended the Punic War period. All these wars resulted in Rome's first overseas conquests of Sicily, Hispania and Africa, and the rise of Rome as a significant imperial power, and began the end of democracy. Late Republic. After defeating the Macedonian and Seleucid empires in the 2nd century BC, the Romans became the dominant people of the Mediterranean Sea. The conquest of the Hellenistic kingdoms brought the Roman and Greek cultures in closer contact, and the Roman elite, once rural, became a luxurious and cosmopolitan one. At this time Rome was a consolidated empire, in the military view, and had no major enemies. Foreign dominance led to internal strife. Senators became rich at the province's expense. Soldiers, who were mostly small-scale farmers, were away from home longer and could not maintain the land, and the increased reliance on foreign slaves and the growth of latifunda reduced the availability of paid work. Income from war booty, mercantilism in the new provinces, and tax farming created new economic opportunities for the wealthy, forming a new class of merchants, called the equestrians. The Lex Claudia forbade members of the Senate from engaging in commerce, so while the equestrians could theoretically join the Senate, they were severely restricted in political power. The Senate squabbled perpetually, repeatedly blocked important land reforms, and refused to give the equestrian class a larger say in the government. Violent gangs of the urban unemployed, controlled by rival senators, intimidated the electorate through violence. The situation came to a head in the late 2nd century BC under the Gracchi brothers, a pair of tribunes who attempted to pass land reform legislation that would redistribute the major patrician land holdings among the plebeians. Both brothers were killed, and the Senate passed reforms reversing the Gracchi brothers' actions. This led to the growing divide of the plebeian groups and equestrian classes. Marius and Sulla. Gaius Marius, a Novus Homo, who started his political career with the help of the powerful Metellai family, soon became a leader of the Republic, holding the first of his 7 consulships in 107 BC by arguing that his former patron Quintus Caecilius Metellus Numidica was not able to defeat and capture the Numidian king Jugurtha. Marius then started his military reform. In his recruitment to fight Jugurtha, he levied very poor and many landless men entered the army. This was the seed of securing loyalty of the army to the general in command. At this time, Marius began his quarrel with Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius, who wanted to capture Jugurtha, asked Bocchus, son-in-law of Jugurtha, to hand him over. As Marius failed, Sulla, a general of Marius at the time, in a dangerous enterprise, went himself to Bocchus and convinced Bocchus to hand Jugurtha over to him. This was very provocative to Marius, since many of his enemies were encouraging Sulla to to oppose Marius. Despite this, Marius was elected for 5 consecutive consulships from 104 to 100 BC, as Rome needed a military leader to defeat the Cimbri and the Teutons, who were threatening Rome. After Marius's retirement, Rome had a brief peace, during which the Italian socii requested Roman citizenship and voting rights. The reformist Marcus Livius Drusus supported the legal process but was assassinated, and the socii revolted against the Romans in the social war. At one point both consuls were killed. Marius was appointed to command the army together with Lucius Julius Caesar and Sulla. By the end of the social war, Marius and Sulla were the premier military men in Rome, and the partisans were in conflict, both sides jostling for power. In 88 BC, Sulla was elected for his first consulship, and his first assignment was to defeat Mithridates VI of Pontus, whose intentions were to conquer the eastern part of the Roman territories. However, Marius's partisans managed his installation to the military command, defying Sulla and the Senate, and this caused Sulla's wrath. To consolidate his own power, Sulla conducted a surprising and illegal action. He marched to Rome with his legions, killing all those who showed support to Marius's cause and impaling the heads in the Roman Forum. In the following year, 87 BC, Marius, who had fled at Sulla's march, returned to Rome while Sulla was campaigning in Greece. He seized power along with the consul Lucius Cornelius Cinna and killed the other consul, Gnaeus Octavius, achieving his 7th consulship. In an attempt to raise Sulla's anger, Marius and Cinna avenged the partisans by conducting a massacre. Marius died in 86 BC, due to age and poor health, just a few months after seizing power. Cinna exercised absolute power until his death in 84 BC. Sulla, after returning from his eastern campaigns, had a free path to re-establish his own power. In 83 BC he made his second march in Rome and began a time of terror. Thousands of nobles, knights and senators were executed. Sulla also held 2 dictatorships and 1 more consulship, which began the crisis and decline of Roman Republic. Caesar and the First Triumvirate. In the mid-1st century BC, Roman politics were restless. Political divisions in Rome became identified with 2 groupings, populares and optimates. Sulla overthrew all populist leaders, and his constitutional reforms removed powers that he had supported populist approaches. Meanwhile, social and economic stresses continued to build. Rome had become a metropolis with a super-rich aristocracy, debt-ridden aspirants, and a large proletariat, often of impoverished farmers. The latter groups supported the Catilinarian conspiracy, a resounding failure, since the consul Marcus Tullius Cicero quickly arrested and executed the main leaders of the conspiracy. Onto this turbulent scene emerged Gaius Julius Caesar, from an aristocratic family of limited wealth. His aunt Julia was Marius's wife, and Caesar identified with the populares. To achieve power, Caesar reconciled the 2 most powerful men in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, who had financed much of his earlier career, and Crassus's rival, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, to whom he married his daughter. He formed them into a new informal alliance including himself, the First Triumvirate. This satisfied the interests of all 3. Crassus, the richest man in Rome, became richer and ultimately achieved high military command. Pompey exerted more influence in the Senate, and Caesar obtained the consulship and military command in Gaul. So long as they could agree, the 3 were in effect the rulers of Rome. In 54 BC, Caesar's daughter, Pompey's wife, died in childbirth, unraveling one link in the alliance. In 53 BC, Crassus invaded Parthia and was killed in the Battle of Carrhae. The triumvirate disintegrated at Crassus's death. Crassus had acted as mediator between Caesar and Pompey, and, without him, the two generals maneuvered against each other for power. Caesar conquered Gaul, obtaining immense wealth, respect in Rome and the loyalty of battle-hardened legions. He also became a clear menace to Pompey and was loathed by many optimates. Confident that Caesar could be stopped by legal means, Pompey's party tried to strip Caesar of his legions, a prelude to Caesar's trial, impoverishment, and exile. To avoid this fate, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River and invaded Rome in 49 BC. Pompey and his party fled from Italy, pursued by Caesar. The Battle of Pharsalus was a brilliant victory for Caesar, and in this and other campaigns he destroyed all of the Optimates' leaders, Metellus Scipio, Cato the Younger, and Pompey's son, Gnaeus Pompeius. Pompey was murdered in Egypt in 48 BC. Caesar was now preeminent over Rome, attracting the bitter enmity of many aristocrats. He was granted many offices and honors. In just 5 years, he held 4 consulships, 2 ordinary dictatorships, and 2 special dictatorships, one for 10 years and another for perpetuity. He was murdered in 44 BC on the Ides of March by the liberators. Octavian and the Second Triumvirate. Caesar's assassination caused political and social turmoil in Rome. Without the dictator's leadership, the city was ruled by his friend and colleague Mark Antony. Soon afterward, Octavius, whom Caesar adopted through his will, arrived in Rome. Octavian tried to align himself with the Caesarian faction. In 43 BC, along with Antony and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, Caesar's best friend, he legally established the Second Triumvirate. This alliance would last for 5 years. Upon its formation, 130 to 300 senators were executed, and the property was confiscated due to the supposed support for the liberators. In 42 BC, the Senate deified Caesar as Divus Iulius. Octavian thus became Divi Filius, the son of the deified. In the same year, Octavian and Antony defeated both Caesar's assassins and the leaders of the liberators, Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, in the Battle of Philippi. The Second Triumvirate was marked by the proscriptions of many senators and equites. After a revolt led by Antony's brother Lucius Antonius, more than 300 senators and equites involved were executed on the anniversary of the Ides of March. Although Lucius was spared, the triumvirate proscribed several important men, including Cicero, whom Antony hated, Quintus Tullius Cicero, the younger brother of the orator, and Lucius Julius Caesar, cousin and friend of the acclaimed general, for his support of Cicero. However, Lucius was pardoned, perhaps because his sister Julia had intervened for him. The triumvirate divided the empire among the triumvirs. Lepidus was given charge of Africa, Antony, the eastern provinces, and Octavian remained in Italia and controlled Hispania and Gaul. The Second Triumvirate expired in 38 BC but was renewed for 5 more years. However, the relationship between Octavian and Antony had deteriorated, and Lepidus was forced to retire in 36 BC after betraying Octavian in Sicily. By the end of the triumvirate, Antony was living in Egypt, an independent and rich kingdom ruled by Antony's lover, Cleopatra VII. Antony's affair with Cleopatra was seen as an act of treason, since she was queen of another country. Additionally, Antony adopted a lifestyle considered too extravagant and Hellenistic for a Roman statesman. Following Antony's donations of Alexandria, which gave to Cleopatra the title of Queen of Kings, and to Antony's and Cleopatra's children the regal titles to the newly conquered eastern territories, war between Octavian and Antony broke out. Octavian annihilated Egyptian forces in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide. Now Egypt was conquered by the Roman Empire, and for the Romans, a new era had begun.